Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope everything is going well with y'all. Crazy world we got going on here. Hopefully things go back to normal soon. I hope I get to see you guys again before graduation, or we'll have to just friend each other on all the social media. I can watch you guys after this thing is over and you all go on to your lives. But hopefully we get to see each other back in school for a little while at least. All right, third cycle's done. Grades are pretty much in. Had some people real late trying to get to me at like 11 o'clock last night. That's not going to work. I put the grades in, but I don't know if Mr. Tejada sent them or not. So yeah, that is what it is. So third cycle's over. Everything we're doing from this point on is fourth cycle, including the pesticide lecture that we did earlier this week, right? So the pesticide work will be fourth cycle. And today we have another set of slides that it is called Integrated Pest Management. So you should have the slides up. You shouldn't be watching me. You should be watching the slides as we go through them, right? Again, I'm sticking with YouTube. I'm sticking with the same format with the slides and a little bit of work at the end and some writing and then some quizzes. We're going to stick with this all through fourth cycle until we get back. I think this is an easy way to do it. I think it's easiest for you guys. I am live, so I am satisfying the needs of the district and the school. I am live for you to sign on and follow along every class and ask any questions if you want to in real time. So I am live every single class period that we have scheduled. I am also here on the computer from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So private messages get to me within an hour or so, and everything is easily communicated between us all. All right. So we're just going to keep doing this, right? And even though I don't get a lot of live people, especially in this class, some classes I get maybe 8 people watching live. Some people I get 2 stragglers or whatever. It doesn't bother me at all because this records and posts right to the classroom. And by the end of the day, when I sign in, when I check the views on the videos usually have 20, 25 views. So that means you guys are going in. I am going back to check to see that you do at least watch the videos, right? So I do see that everybody's watching the videos and everybody's getting the work and everybody's opening the slides. So I can see all that. So that you're not live, and watching during the class time doesn't bother me so much as long as you're getting the work done, right? Now, if you have something to ask, if you like listening to me go through the slides in real time and you want to ask any questions or something, that's fine. But again, I'm not too concerned with how many views I get while I'm live. I'm concerned with how many views the videos get by the end of the day, and it seems like most of you are signing in and checking that out. So I'm cool with that. All right, let's get to the slides. So you should have the slide. Next time we meet, there's going to be a quiz. I'm going to talk about that at the end of this video. So let's go to Lesson 7, Integrated Pest Management. That is what we're looking at right now. Integrated Pest Management. So we have been talking about, before spring break, we started talking about agriculture, and we started talking about the Green Revolution, and we started talking about how farmers figured out efficient ways to grow more crops, crop rotation. Then we got more into the science of things. We got into GMOs and genetic engineering, right? And then we got into other things that could affect agriculture, like irrigation, right? And figuring out irrigation and the nutrients in the soil, and did the soil get salty, and how does that happen? Right? And how do we prevent that stuff? And then we got into pesticides, and we talked about a lot of the bad side of pesticides, mass use of pesticides, and what it could be linked to, right? So now we're going into something called integrated pest management. Slide 2 is just the agenda as usual. Slide 3 is a review from the pesticide slideshow. Look at that at your leisure, excuse me. Slide 4 is the objective. And the objective today is to be able to explain what integrated pest management is, to be able to break down the 4 different steps of integrated pest management. So I'm on slide 5, all right? Integrated pest management, IPM. That's what I'm going to call it from now on, IPM. You can write IPM on a quiz or a test. Integrated pest management, IPM. All right, so we don't just plant food in crops and then spray pesticide all over them until we get food. We don't do that. Maybe they used to do that as a preventative measure, but we don't do that because we know pesticides can be dangerous now, right? So we don't spray a bunch of pesticides and poisons as a preventative measure. No, we have to go through a process. The farmers, agriculture industry, they have to go through a process. This process is called IPM, Integrated Pest Management. Right? You need to do all of these 4 steps, and we'll go through each of these 4 steps individually on the next slides. The 4 steps of IPM are setting action thresholds. 2 is prevention. 3 is monitor and identify pests. And 4 is control of pests. All right. So IPM isn't a single method. It's a series of management evaluations and decisions and control, right? It's moving slowly. It's analyzing. It's being smart about things. That's what IPM is, okay? So we're going to go to the first step of IPM, which is slide 6, and that is setting an action threshold. All right. Before taking control action, IPM must first set action thresholds. A threshold is a point at which populations or environmental conditions indicate that pest control action must be taken. Okay, a threshold is a point that you set for something, anything, right? I can have a patience threshold, like my patience threshold is here. Anytime anyone tests my patience at this level, I'm okay because this is my patience threshold, right? If anyone busts that patience threshold, if my kids keep getting on me, getting on me, and you go above the threshold, then an action takes place, right? You've broken my patience threshold, and I say, all right, stop. I lose my patience, right? So that's what a threshold is, a point that you set for whatever it is, and then if it's broken, an action takes place. So setting an action threshold for agriculture means that there has to be a point that is set, right? And it's set, it's very intricate how it's set. It's set and everything's okay until you pass that point. And then you say, okay, we have a pest problem. We have to start trying to control it, all right? So this is the level at which anything below this is acceptable. Anything above this is not, and an action has to take place, all right? So what that means is citing a single pest does not always mean that you need control. Imagine a farmer goes out onto his crops and he wakes up in the morning drinking his coffee and he goes outside and he sees a caterpillar on one of the leaves of his crops, right? And maybe caterpillars are pests to that type of crop. We're just speaking hypothetically. He sees the caterpillar and he says, oh no, I got a pest problem. My crops are going to get screwed, blah, 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 blah. You know, he's not allowed to just call in the plane to dump pesticides all over his plant, all over his crops, all over our food because he saw one caterpillar. That's not going to work. All right. So citing a few pests doesn't mean that you need to control them yet. Also, so that's a variable, right? One of the variables that goes into setting the threshold is how many of the pests are there? What's the population of the pests? So, and the threshold changes depending on how big your farm is, what you're growing, what the pest is, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's set individually per farm. So let's just say on this farmer's farm with the caterpillars that are pests, let's say, okay, if there's, with the area that he has and the food that he has, if there's more than 2,000 caterpillars, that's a problem. Anything under 2,000 caterpillars is acceptable for this farm. And I'm just making this number up. So if he has a way, if they take an inventory, if they count, if they walk around their crops and they can obviously see more than 2,000 caterpillars, that means the threshold is broken and action has to take place. All right. That's not the only variable. The other variable, which is tied to it, is economic threat. All right. So as we said in the 40s, when we talked about the 40s and when we talked about pesticides and we talked about the 80s, we said in the 40s, when they were using certain pesticides, they would lose about 7% of their crops to pests. And that was acceptable. That was an acceptable loss, is what they called it, right? So that number started to creep up over the years from the 40s to the 80s. And then there was a 10% loss, and farmers were like, oh, okay, I'm losing a little money here. And then there was a 12% loss. And like, whoa, I'm losing money. There's a percentage, right, that you set as a threshold on every farm, every crop, depending on how big it is, that if you start to lose more than that percentage, that becomes an economic threat to you. So you start to lose money and really suffer because of the pests. So you could say, all right, these caterpillars on this farm, if there's more than 2,000 of them, then that's past the threshold and action needs to be taken. Or if there's more than 15% of the crops that are being lost to to the pests, then that passes the threshold too. All right. So they say, okay, more than 2,000 caterpillars or more than 15% of your crops are being destroyed by pests. Then the threshold is broken. All right. So that's the first step, setting that threshold, figuring out when it's a problem and when it's not. All right. Slide 7. Slide 7 is the next step, step 2, and that's prevention. And what prevention is I like to think of it as proactive prevention. This is prevention. This is doing something before it becomes a problem. So it's being proactive, all right? So that's the first line of pest control, to be proactive about it. In agriculture, that means that you should be doing things like crop rotation, right? If you rotate crops, then any pests don't know exactly where they are. So it takes just a little bit longer for the pest to infest that area. And it's almost playing hide and seek in a really weird way, right? Because if you have your crops growing in the same spot every year, the pests, they know that. The caterpillars know exactly where to go. If you have the land and you're moving your crops around the land, then it's harder for the pests to sort of keep track of where to go. And that time that it takes could be enough to prevent a big, huge outbreak of over 2,000 caterpillars or whatever our hypothetical situation is, right? You can also buy pest-resistant varieties of crops. So many seeds, many different crops have genetic engineering, and that genetic engineering makes them pest-resistant, right? So you may be able to buy a seed that's pest-resistant to these caterpillars that the farmer's having issues with, and then the caterpillars don't find that crop edible or desirable, so they don't bother it. That doesn't mean that another pest can't come in, right? Just because you have one pest doesn't, you can have more than one pest in a field. So that could be interesting, right? I'll take my glasses off because that reflection's bothering me. All right, so you can have that, right? The control methods can be very effective. So preventative measures can be very, very effective. Little cost, right? Very cost efficient, and pretty much have no harm or risk to people in the environment. So it's preventative measures, right? When I think of this being proactive, I think of, okay, there's some people that are nuts about their lawn. They mow their lawn and their lawns are beautiful. And they go out and they prevent weeds from coming by putting down natural stuff or making sure they do this or they do that. And they put down weed barriers because they don't want, that's preventing weeds from even starting, right? Because weeds are pests, plants can be pests as well. Now, I'm not proactive when it comes to prevention of things like that because I don't care so much. I mow my lawn and that's about it. If I see weeds come up, then I spray them with something and they die, right? Or I pull them and that's that. But prevention is a way that they are being proactive about not allowing pests, right? Some pests are large. You can have deer being a pest to your crops, right? And it probably doesn't take a lot of deer to decimate a corn crop or something. So you can put up a fence around your, if you have the ability to put up a fence, you can do that around your crops, right? So that's a way to prevent. All right, so that's step 2. Slide 8 goes to step 3. That's called monitoring and identifying pests, all right? Not all insects that you see, right? When the farmer goes out and looks at his crops, not all insects he sees or weeds that he sees, not all of them require control. Many of them are innocuous. Many of them are just not dangerous. They're just indifferent. They don't hurt the crops. They just happen to live there, right? Or they don't hurt them enough for it to be a problem. Some of them are even beneficial. So, for instance, I have a friend who's a real garden. He has a huge garden in his backyard, and he doesn't like to use any kind of chemicals. So he buys on Amazon every year. He buys like 2,000 ladybugs. He just buys ladybugs and he lets them go in his garden and they live there and, they feed on all of the little bugs and mites that could be pests in his garden. So he uses the ladybugs to control them, which I think is pretty cool. The first thing you have to do, the point of that is the first thing you have to do is identify what's a pest and what's not, what's dangerous to your crops and what isn't, right? So you have to identify pests and you have to know what you're growing and what's dangerous. And then you also have to monitor. So monitoring, right? You don't just set a threshold and then, do a couple of those prevention methods and then sit back and wait for your stuff. You don't know if those prevention methods are going to work or not. So you have to monitor, right? If you've identified that there are pests, You have to monitor. You have to go out on a daily, weekly, and you have to look and say, oh, well, it looks like yesterday I only saw 2 caterpillars. Now it looks like I'm seeing 10. You have to monitor the situation to make sure that everything's going okay and you stay below the threshold. All right. So that's what that's about. Slide 9. Yes, slide 9. The next step, 4th step, is control. All right. So once you've identified that there's pests, once you've monitored that, once you have done all those preventative measures and tried your best to keep those pests away, eventually, when all of that doesn't work and you reach the action threshold, whatever action threshold you've set, right? Companies come in and do that, and even organizations come in and do that. Once you pass that threshold, I've done everything that I could possibly be doing, and I've still passed the threshold. Control has to come in now. Once you pass the threshold, control has to happen. But we're still not, think about it, we still haven't done anything with poisons, anything with anything that hurts us, right? What you do first, the first line of control is using effective but less risky pest control. We're not poisoning yet. So there's a couple ways that our agriculture farmers can do this. One is biological control, right? And biological control is what I just mentioned with my friend and his ladybugs, right? He used an animal that is not harmful to his garden to control the pests in his garden, because they happen to prey on those pests. The ladybugs prey on the things that are bothering his garden, right? We did this with bullfrogs a couple of months ago. We had overpopulation of bullfrogs, yes, in a pond. And what did we do? We thought of 5 or 6 different ways to control the bullfrogs. And one of those ways to introduce the largemouth bass, the fish, to the environment, because the largemouth bass love to eat the baby bullfrogs. That was a way to naturally, biologically control the population of bullfrogs. So you can biologically control pests by finding a predator of that pest. And if that predator doesn't cause any harm to your crops, boom, introduce it, and it can happen, right? You can also do things like if the pest happens to, you can have parasites infect the pest. So, parasites kill their host. So if you can find a parasite that uses that pest as a host, you can actually introduce that parasite to these pests. The parasite will make its way through the pest population and kill the pests. So that's a form of biological control. Another way they do it is they try to disrupt the pest's mating cycle. All right. So animals, right? And we're a little different, even though we're animals, but animals, they have mating seasons, and they do certain things to attract the eye of the opposite sex so they can mate and so they can reproduce, right? And one of the things that animals do is they secrete these natural pheromones, these hormones and these natural pheromone scents. And what that will do is when it's mating season, the female may have these pheromones which alert the male that she is ready to mate. Right? So sort of like a sign, sort of like a little beacon that goes out and says, hey, so these pheromones can be picked up in the scent of males or females or whatever. And there's pheromones for more things than just attraction. There's pheromones for aggression and stuff like that. Scientists can target those chemicals and they can stop them or they can disrupt them. So if the female of the pest species is looking to mate and tries to secrete these pheromones, that wouldn't work, or something would be disrupted in that process and the males wouldn't know they're ready to mate and no mating would occur. So that is what we sort of control them. And then there's mechanical control, right? If weeds are a pest in your garden, you can just go out and pick them, right? You can just pick the weeds. A lot of farmers do that. And, farming, when you're a real farmer and that's what you do for your life, you usually have a lot of family members that you bring into this scenario. So that's something like the kids would be doing, like going out once or twice a week as a chore and looking at the crops and picking some weeds and stuff like that. So that's a mechanical control. You're just ripping them out. That's it. Or you can trap, right? You can try to trap the pests. So if it's little bugs, if it's little insects, you can set up these little, like we have them for mice in technology, where there's those sticky pads. You ever see the sticky pads on the floor? And if a mouse happens to go by, boom, they get stuck on it, right? Well, same thing. They have these sticky pads that if the if the pests walk into, they get stuck, and that's a way to trap them. So those are all ways to try to control it without using dangerous poisons to humans, right? So slide 10. Now, if we do all that, if the threshold is broken, if we've tried all the biological control, the pests are still there, right? We've done plenty of preventative measures, and we still have a pest problem. We're still above the action threshold. We can't bring it down with biological control or with trapping or with disrupting their mating, right? What we can do now is we move to the last step, or second to last step, which would be, okay, looks like we got to break out some pesticides. Looks like we have to use some chemicals to control this because it's out of control, right? But as you notice in the first picture on slide 19, you see something, and this is called targeted spraying. So you have to evaluate your crops and your farm, and you have to say, okay, it looks like most of the pests infested the southwest corner of the farm. The rest of the farm seems to be okay and controllable, but that southwest corner is a mess. That's where they're all partying and eating my stuff. So you would target spray. You would either go out with the tanks on your back and full gear, and you would spray individual plants, or if it's a larger area, you would use a tractor like that picture, and you would spray just in the area where you see the majority of the pests. Now, those are obviously poison is poison, and that's not a good thing for us, but at least you're only doing it in the section where you feel like you need it, right? You're spraying it directly on the ground, directly on the plant, so it's not going really anywhere else. So it's a better way of using a pesticide. Hopefully that works. We've done everything. Still not working. We target sprayed the southwest corner, but they just moved, and they're just starting to take over the whole crop, and this is a huge problem. We can't stop it. Boom. This, as a last resort, is when you use something called broadcast spraying. That's the bottom right-hand corner there, the picture. Broadcast spraying is also known as generally known as crop dusting. All right. What you do, you hire some dude. He puts tanks and tanks and tanks and gallons of pesticides in the back of his plane, and he flies his plane over your land, and he opens up those tanks, and all that pesticide mist dusts. That's why they call it crop dusting. Dusts the crops with that pesticide mist, right? And you can do your whole land, 20, 30, 100 acres really, really quickly. It's cost effective, doesn't take a long time, doesn't cost a lot of money, and then boom, you're not going to have any more pests. But now we have the problem with pesticides that we talked about last time, right? So we have to think about that. You see it in the air there. You see the road right next to that picture. If the winds are picking up, right? You see the forest or the woods behind it, the trees behind the land that they're dusting. That stuff will move in there and probably kill other things that are just living naturally out in the woods. So it's not a good thing, right? If there's any humans in the area breathing this stuff in, not good, right? If there's any water, if there's a river nearby, if there's a stream nearby, this is going to settle into that too. So a lot of problems when you crop dust, but as a last resort, if you need to keep your food, it's very, very effective. All right. So that is integrated pest management. If anything, you get out of that, you get out of the fact that there's a road you have to take. There are checkpoints that you have to try a lot of things before you can just go and start dusting, right? Does that mean it happens all the time? Who knows, right? You have farmer, industry, and maybe they're just crop dusting as a first choice, and they're not even going through this IPM, which is a bad thing. But for the most part, this is regulated and this is watched, and you have to have records of you doing certain things before you get to the point where you're going to use pesticides and all that stuff. So that's pretty interesting. All right, slide 11. Pass right by it because it's guided practice. It's just a word. Okay, and then slide 12 and 13 are important as well. Slide 12. We talked about organic food last time we talked about pesticides. So what does it mean to be organic, right? And probably a couple of these things, but in order to be able to label your food as organic, truly organic, you have to go through a bunch of different steps to become sort of certified organic, which we'll talk about in a second. And these steps are here in green. No human sewage or sludge fertilizer can be used in the cultivation of the plants or the animals that you're going to designate as organic. So organic food, right? Plants, animals, organic food does not have any kind of human sewage, sludge, fertilizer. Yes, we use human sewage, sludge as fertilizer, not just animal manure. We are animals and we use that too. And that's, ugh, just even think about that. But anyway, organic food, organic animals do not, being grown, do not have any of that stuff used on the land. All right. Second one is avoidance of synthetic chemical inputs. That's the one that everyone, they think of organic, right? No antibiotics, no pesticides, no food additives like preservatives, no genetically modified organisms, right? You plant the seed, you grow the seed, and that's it. You don't do anything with chemicals, right? The third step is to use farmland that has been free from the prohibited chemicals for a number of years. All right, that means that if you are a farmer and you've been farming for 20 years using fertilizers and pesticides and all that, and you wake up one day and you say, oh, this year I'm going to be organic. No, you're not. You can't farm on land that has been used with fertilizers and pesticides to be organic. You have to let that land sit for 3 years. So that's, and 3 or more. And that's the amount of time it takes for those fertilizers and those pesticides to move out of the dirt. And then you could be in clean dirt, right? So if you want to be an organic farmer, you have to find a farm that you can buy that hasn't been used in a long time, if you want to be an organic farmer, or you can go and buy land that's never been farmed before, and you can do that, right? So that's another interesting thing. The next one says keeping detailed records of things that you do and cleaning methods and storage methods and all that. The next one says maintaining strict physical separation of organic products. What that means is many people have organic, some of their farm is organic and some is not. So they may be growing organic corn, but they don't grow organic wheat, right? So if you have acreage and you are growing this stuff, and you want to have half of your farm be organic and the other half not, there has to be a physical separation between the two areas. And you can't use anything. You can't share anything. You can't share the same equipment. You can't share the same storage area. You can't share the same processing plant. You have to have a total separation of everything on your organic farm. And the last step is that there are periodic unannounced on-site inspections by the USDA, government agency, that comes in and makes sure that all of these steps are being adhered to. All right. So the next slide, 13. There are levels of organicness. And if you look at these levels here, you see that the top level is 100% organic. The next one just says organic, right? And then the next one say things like made with organic ingredients, stuff like that, right? If you notice the top two have that little circle, the USDA organic. That is a certification seal. That means that the USDA, the agency, has gone into these farms that are growing this food and selling this food and have done the inspections and have come up with the designation that this is either a 100% organic farm or an organic farm, right? So if you're really into buying organic stuff and you really want to buy organic, if it doesn't have this seal on it, most likely it's not organic enough for someone who's shopping for organic. Okay. Farmers don't have to put this seal on their food, but anyone that goes through the trouble of having a 100% or an organic farm will definitely have that seal on their food. Right. So it's not required, but it's definitely something that they always do, because people that are really, really, really into buying organic food will go straight to those seals, and they won't buy if they don't see those seals. So the 100% organic, all those things are always met that we just went through on the last slide. The organic with the seal means that 95% or higher is organic. And that might mean like they use some of the same equipment, right, that they use for their non-organic part of their farm. So maybe they use the same tractor, or maybe there's not enough of a physical separation between the organic and the non-organic, right? So, or maybe they add one preservative to their food. So, it's 95% organic. That's still good. We're going to label it organic, but we won't label it 100%, obviously, right? And then there's these other two levels, which get real shady and sketchy. They're not sealed. They're not certified. Nobody's come in and done inspections, right? But there's that number threshold. I don't know if it's a 70%, right? So there's one of those that say 70 to 95% sort of, is you can label your food organic. You can say that this is organic because it's made with organic ingredients. So some people will go out and they're clueless. They look and they grab something off the shelf and they're trying to be healthy and all this stuff, and they don't, want pesticides and all this stuff. And they'll say, "Oh, look at this! It's made with organic ingredients. It's organic." Companies will even write organic on the top, and then in their small print say made with organic ingredients. They're not required to tell you how much or what the ingredient is. So you never really know. And even less than 70%, right? They can say contains organic ingredients, right? Now, if you're just looking for the word organic because you're trying to eat healthy, you're going to buy that stuff thinking it's organic food when it's not. That just means that maybe the wheat in the chips was organic, but there's tons of preservatives on the chips and tons of everything else on the chips, right? So when you really truly want to buy organic, you look for that USDA organic seal, and you know that it's at least 95% organic, and it's not just like one little ingredient that was thrown in there and the rest of it is disgusting poisons and preservatives and GMOs and all that other stuff. All right, so that's an interesting thing if you're ever into organic food. Slide 14, 15, and 16 are the independent practice, what you're supposed to do. I am not collecting anything from this slideshow. I am not requiring that you do anything from this slideshow. In the materials, you will see that I've given you the daily attendance, which you're always filling out. There's also like a school-wide attendance now that is on that website, or that is on the Google Classroom, the technology Google Classroom that Mr. Reyes wanted everyone to sign up for. So don't forget to sign up for that. So you're signing my daily attendance. You're not stopping that. You're just signing in a couple places. You have the slideshow for the materials that we just went through, and you have a little it's a quiz. It says quiz, but it's not. It's an exit ticket, right? So that's what you have to do. And it's a very, very quick thing about IPM. So it'll take you about 2 minutes. So that's what I want turned in. But the reason why I'm not giving you any kind of big writing assignment or anything like that is because the next time we meet, we have a quiz. All right. So I think that's Wednesday is when the 9th period meets, Wednesday and Friday. So we're going to have a quiz next time you come. So next time you come in, I'm going to go live for a few minutes in case you have any questions right away. And then I'm going to post the quiz. And we know what's the timeline. We know, I will probably end up grading that quiz within 2 days. So if you don't get to it within that 2 days, make sure you private message me and tell me you did it late and all that other stuff, right? So we'll get to that though. So the quiz itself is 8 questions with a couple multi-parts. So it's about 12 questions. It is not multiple choice. It is not fill in the blank. It is like the previous quizzes that we've been doing. So it's kind of short answer, explain this or explain that, or look at this graph, what's going on. So it's one of those things, right? It's in Google Docs. So I'll send it to you. And that. What else do I want to say? The content that's on the quiz, right, starts from our last test. So I think we took that last test at the end of March. And I believe if you go to the classroom and you look at 3/27, March 27th, right? That was either the day of the test or the day after the test, right? You go to where it says unit test, the last test we took, and the very, very next day that we have materials on the classroom, that will be agriculture. Agriculture started on lesson 2. You know how when you open up the slides and it gives you the title, like today is lesson 7, integrated pest management. We started with lesson 2. So don't search for a lesson 1. We start at lesson 2. So that means for this quiz, we have the slides for lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, lesson 5, lesson 6, and lesson 7. There are 6 slideshows for this quiz, for this 8-question quiz. All right. So you're really going to have like maybe 1 question from each of these things. If I were studying, if I were you, I would have all of these slideshows at the ready and in one place. So it's easy to study from them, right? But that's just me. You do it however you want. So that's the deal. If you have any questions about the upcoming quiz, just private message me. I'm here every day. Just because we don't meet and I don't go live with you guys doesn't mean that I'm not here every day. I'm here every day from 8 to 3:30, and I usually check at night too. So just private message me on whatever work you're having problems with or whatever questions you might have, and I'll get back to you right away. All right. So I want you guys to have a good weekend. I want you guys to relax, find something to stave away the boredom, and study, study, study. Next time, real quick live session, and then post the quiz. All right. I will talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful weekend.